The final whisper, Jesus' last alert before the rapture. Opening hook. Have you ever felt something shift inside your spirit? A quiet stirring you couldn't explain, like the world around you kept spinning as usual. But deep within, something whispered, "Wake up." If you felt that lately, you're not imagining it. Something sacred is happening. Something Jesus spoke about long before our time. This isn't a global headline. It's a spiritual heartbeat. Faint to some, but unmistakable to those who are listening. The still voice in a noisy world. In every generation, people have looked to the skies, waiting for signs, searching for proof, craving the spectacular. But Jesus never said the greatest warning would come with thunder or fire. He said it would come like a whisper in the middle of the storm. And if your soul is too loud, you might miss it. Today, we live in a world filled with motion. Screens flashing, voices shouting, everything demanding our attention. We scroll, we rush, we fill the silence with noise because silence feels strange now. But what if silence is exactly where God speaks? What if the most urgent message for this generation isn't found in chaos, but in calm? Not in breaking news, but in a breaking heart? Somewhere between the noise of the world and the quiet of your own heart, a divine alert has begun to sound. Not through fear, not through politics, but through the Spirit. A final alert that Jesus himself spoke of. One that separates those who are truly awake from those merely existing. The forgotten message. When Jesus walked among us, his disciples were fascinated by prophecy. They asked him about the end of the age, about signs, about the great and terrible day of the Lord. They wanted to know when, but Jesus redirected them. He didn't give them a date. He gave them a condition. Watch. That one word carried the weight of eternity. Watch, not just the sky, but your heart. Watch, not for disasters, but for distractions. Because the greatest danger to a believer is not persecution, it's preoccupation. Jesus saw this generation coming. A world flooded with comfort, convenience, and endless entertainment. He knew that the most effective trap wouldn't be fear, but numbness. And so he gave a warning that was not political, not cosmic, but personal. A warning meant to pierce through spiritual sleep and say, "Stay awake. I'm closer than you think." The quiet turning of time. If you pay attention, you can sense it. The subtle turning of spiritual seasons. It's not loud or obvious, but it's everywhere. Hearts that once burned with passion now flicker with weariness. Churches once filled with worship now filled with distraction. Faith once simple and strong now tangled in arguments and opinions. This isn't coincidence. It's the sound of prophecy unfolding softly, just as Jesus said it would. He described a time when love would grow cold, when truth would be twisted, when faith would fade into comfort. And if that doesn't sound familiar, then maybe you haven't been listening closely. The final alert isn't about earthquakes or wars. Those are surface tremors. The real quake is happening inside human hearts. It's in the quiet compromise and neglected prayer, the tired spirit that says, "Maybe tomorrow," but what if tomorrow never comes? The personal call. There's a moment in the gospel that often gets overlooked. The parable of the 10 virgins. It's not just a story about lamps and oil. It's a mirror, showing the difference between those who live ready and those who live relaxed. 5 were wise. 5 were foolish. But they all started the same way, waiting for the same bridegroom. The only difference? The wise ones had oil when the midnight cry sounded. That midnight cry, that's what this moment feels like. A sudden awareness that time is shorter than we thought. Not panic, but clarity. Not fear, but focus. Because the midnight cry doesn't come to scare us. It comes to prepare us. Jesus' final alert isn't a shout of doom. It's a whisper of love saying, "Don't fall asleep now. I'm almost here." A story closer than you think. Imagine a man waiting for a storm. He checks the sky, watches the horizon, listens for thunder. But while he's distracted, smoke begins to rise inside his own house. That's what this generation has become. Waiting for signs outside while missing the fire within. The final alert isn't about the world collapsing. It's about your heart being ready. It's about the small choices that shape eternity. Forgiveness when it's hard, faith when it's quiet, obedience when no one sees. Jesus never promised us we'd recognize the exact moment. He promised we'd know the season. And if you can feel the weight in the air, the spiritual tension between what is and what's about to be, then maybe this is that season. The clock and the compass. Prophecy isn't meant to feed curiosity. It's meant to inspire preparation. Every word Jesus spoke carried timing and tenderness. He didn't just tell us what would happen. He told us how to live before it does. He gave us both a clock and a compass, the awareness of time and the direction of heart. Right now, that clock is ticking louder than ever. Deception has become normalized. Truth sounds offensive. Faith has turned into fashion. But even in this, the compass still points true north, toward Christ. That's why this alert matters. Because when the spiritual clock strikes its final hour, there won't be another warning. No headline, no hashtag, no preacher loud enough to reach the ones who chose to sleep through the sound. The time to listen is now. The gentle alarm. Think of how alarms work. They don't exist to frighten you. They exist to wake you. And that's what Jesus' final alert is. Not a threat, but an act of mercy. Because love always warns before it leaves. Right now, that alarm is ringing softly. In your thoughts, in your prayers, in that uneasy feeling that something is changing. You don't need to see angels or hear trumpets to know when heaven is stirring. Sometimes it's a still, small voice that carries the loudest truth, the invitation. This is not about doom or fear. This is about invitation. An invitation to realign, to return, to reawaken. Maybe you've been walking through a season of silence, wondering if God still speaks. He does. But maybe he's not shouting. Maybe he's whispering, "Come back to me. I've missed you." The beauty of grace is that it always leaves the door open until the very last moment. That's what this alert is. The door hasn't closed yet, but it will. The gate is still open, but not forever. The bridegroom is still waiting, but not endlessly. And when that moment comes, when eternity breaks through time, it won't matter how many sermons you've heard or how many prophecies you've studied. It'll come down to one thing. Were you ready? Bridging toward the next chapter. In the chapters that follow, we'll look deeper into what Jesus actually said about the timeline, how he mapped out events not to confuse us, but to comfort us. You'll see how every prophecy fits together like pieces of a divine puzzle, and why this moment in history feels like a spiritual intersection between heaven and earth. But before we go there, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, am I awake? Because the story we're about to unfold isn't just about the world. It's about you. It's about the part of your heart that still listens when heaven speaks. So if you've been hearing that quiet whisper, that inner stirring that says prepare, don't ignore it. That's not anxiety. That's the alert. And it's calling you right now. The prophetic timeline, the silent countdown. You remember how we ended, that quiet tension between knowing the alert has sounded and realizing it's already here. But what if Jesus didn't just warn us about the moment? What if he gave us the entire timeline leading to it? A prophetic sequence, laid out step by step, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those willing to listen. Let's trace it together, not as scholars or theologians, but as sons and daughters trying to understand what time it really is. Scene 1. The first step, the rise of deception. When Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, his disciples came to him privately, asking, "Lord, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" His very first words were not about wars or earthquakes. He said, "Take heed that no one deceives you." Deception, that's the first domino. It's subtle, not obvious. It doesn't come dressed as darkness. It often comes disguised as light. It tells half-truths wrapped in comforting language. And here's the thing. Jesus wasn't talking about deception outside the church. He was talking about deception within it. We live in an age where truth has become negotiable, where emotional comfort has replaced conviction, where sermons can make us feel good, but rarely make us holy. This is how deception wins, not by force, but by seduction. It dulls the edge of truth until we can't tell the difference between surrender and self-help. And this, Jesus said, would mark the beginning of the end. Deception doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in the voice of culture, saying, "It's okay, you have time." But every time we believe that lie, the clock ticks forward. Scene 2, the cooling of love, hearts growing cold. Jesus continued, Because lawlessness will increase, the love of many will grow cold. This is the second stage in the prophetic timeline. We see it everywhere, not just in society, but in our own hearts. Once upon a time, we burned for God. We prayed with tears, worshiped with passion, forgave easily. Now, we scroll, we rush, we react, but rarely feel. Our generation confuses emotion with intimacy. We know how to express, but we've forgotten how to dwell. The love that once made the early church fearless has turned into polite belief. But the Lord never asked for politeness. He asked for passion. When love grows cold, it doesn't happen overnight. It fades like the last ember in a fire that once roared. Jesus warned us of this, not to condemn us, but to wake us. Because when love fades, discernment fades too. Cold hearts can't feel the temperature drop around them. And that's exactly where the enemy thrives, in numbness. Scene 3, division, the great spiritual separation. Then comes division, not political, not cultural, but spiritual. Jesus spoke of 2 people in one field, one taken, one left, 2 sleeping in one bed, one gone, one remaining. That wasn't about location. It was about condition. The separation has already begun. Look around, you can sense it. Some believers are waking up, weeping, repenting. Others are yawning through the midnight cry, saying, it's not that serious. But the truth is, this division isn't meant to scare us. It's meant to clarify us. It reveals who truly hears the shepherd's voice and who's still distracted by the noise. The lines are being drawn quietly, not with anger, but with alignment. God is gathering his remnant, not the perfect, but the pure in heart. If you felt like you don't fit in lately, that your spirit is restless, that comfort feels wrong, that might be the Holy Spirit separating you for something, not from something. You're being positioned for what's next on the timeline. Scene 4, the final alert, the quiet alarm. And then comes the moment Jesus called the alert. A quiet alarm that only those awake will hear. It's not the chaos of war or the shock of disaster. It's a still, small voice saying, be ready. I'm closer than you think. Imagine being in a crowded airport, people rushing, talking, laughing, and suddenly, over the intercom, your name is called for final boarding. Most won't notice, but you will, because you are listening. That's what this prophetic alert feels like. It's personal. It's not meant to terrify, but to tenderize a heart. It's not about looking at the sky, but about looking inward, at whether your lamp still burns or has quietly gone out. This is where many mistake the timeline. They wait for something grand, global, loud. But Jesus said this signal would be intimate, between the bridegroom and his bride, a whisper in the night before the doors close. Scene 5, the final countdown, from alert to arrival. Here's what makes this moment unlike any other in history. Every stage that Jesus described has already begun. Deception? It's everywhere. Cold love? It's common. Division? It's visible. And the alert? It's ringing, softly, persistently, through the hearts of those who still care to listen. We are standing between the division and the final call, between awareness and awakening. And when this final alert finishes its echo, the next sound will be the trumpet, the moment of divine interruption. That's why Jesus didn't say, be successful. He said, be ready, because readiness is not about achievement. It's about alignment. When the King returns, he won't be looking for crowds. He'll be looking for candles still burning. So as we continue this journey into his prophetic timeline, remember, you're not watching history repeat. You're watching prophecy unfold, one breath, one heartbeat, one decision at a time. The final call, awakening before the door closes. We've walked through the timeline, from deception to division, from silence to the final alert. But this story, it doesn't end with fear. It ends with invitation. Because every prophecy Jesus gave wasn't meant to scare his followers. It was meant to prepare them. And that's what this moment is about. Preparation. Not possessions or plans, but a heart. Scene 1, the door and the midnight cry. Jesus once told a parable, one that many know, but few really feel. 10 virgins waiting for the bridegroom. 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. They all had lamps. They all fell asleep. But when the midnight cry came, Only half were ready. That's the parable of this generation. We all carry lamps. We all claim to wait. But the oil, the quiet, daily surrender that keeps faith burning, that's what separates watching from wandering. The midnight cry is not coming. It's already echoing through the spirit. A whisper saying, "Wake up, he's near." And for those listening, it's not about panic. It's about purpose. It's the realization that we're not waiting for something to start. We're living in what's already begun. Scene 2, the illusion of time. We've been trained to think there's more time, that one day we'll pray more, one day we'll forgive, one day we'll obey. But one day is the favorite lie of the enemy. Jesus said, "No one knows the day or the hour." But he also said, when you see these things begin to happen, look up. That means the clock isn't hidden. It's visible if your heart is awake. Look around our world today. Morality isn't just declining, it's celebrated. Faith isn't persecuted only by governments, but by distraction. Even in our comfort, something feels hollow. It's as if creation itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to shift. And that's because it is. Paul wrote, "All creation groans, waiting for the revealing of the sons of God." The countdown isn't just cosmic, it's personal. Each moment we choose obedience over apathy. We push back the darkness. The illusion of time ends the moment you realize eternity has already started. Scene 3, the hidden revival. But in the midst of this spiritual coldness, something beautiful is happening. A quiet revival. Not the stadium kind with lights and cameras, but the hidden kind, in bedrooms, in prisons, in war zones, in churches that refuse to fall asleep. Hearts are waking up again. People are fasting not for fame but for fire. Men are repenting. Women are forgiving. Teenagers are closing their screens and opening their Bibles. This is not religion rising. It's relationship being reborn. God is gathering his remnant, the ones who still whisper, "Here I am, Lord." And maybe that's why you're hearing this right now, because you're part of that remnant. You weren't chosen to fear the end. You were chosen to shine in it. Scene 4, the final warning and the great invitation. If you listen closely, the final alert is not shouting, it's inviting. It says, "Come closer, light your lamp again. There's still time." This is the mercy of Jesus. Even at the edge of eternity, he still knocks. He still calls names. He still waits for hearts to turn. And that's why this moment matters. Because the difference between being ready and being almost ready is eternal. This isn't about fear of missing out. It's about the joy of being found. The King is coming, not as a distant ruler, but as a bridegroom returning for love. He's not looking for religion. He's looking for relationship, not for performance, but for presence. The final warning is really a final invitation to return, to repent, to rekindle, to make sure your oil hasn't run dry while you were waiting. Scene 5, the awakening before the door closes. Picture this. A quiet night, the world still moving, still scrolling, still sleeping. And then the trumpet. No warning, no delay, just the sound of eternity breaking into time. But for those who've been watching, it won't be a shock. It'll be a reunion, because they were already awake inside. And that's what Jesus meant all along. He didn't say, "Fear the signs." He said, "Lift your head." Because readiness is not about paranoia. It's about posture, a heart facing upward, expectant, alive. You don't need to know the exact hour. You just need to be lit when he arrives. Because when the door closes, it won't be cruelty. It'll be completion. The wedding has begun. The waiting will be over. So if you feel that stirring in your soul, that quiet pull, don't ignore it. That's the Spirit saying, it's time. Scene 6, the personal response. Before we close this message, pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, am I awake? Not just spiritually aware, but spiritually alive. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest. Because awakening starts in confession, and readiness grows in surrender. Maybe this is your moment to let go of the sin you've been justifying, of the fear that's been paralyzing, of the distraction that's been numbing. Jesus is not distant. He's one surrender away. And if you've made it this far, you've already heard his alert. Now, the only question is, what will you do with it? Scene 7, the hope beyond the horizon. This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of forever. The same Jesus who gave the timeline also gave the promise. I go to prepare a place for you. That means heaven is not just a dream. It's a destination. And it's almost ready. Every tear, every trial, every unanswered prayer, they're not wasted. They're reminders that this world isn't home. That one day, the trumpet will sound, and what we've longed for will finally appear. No more deception. No more cold hearts. Just the warmth of his presence, the light of his love, and the joy of seeing him face to face. Until then, stay awake, stay watchful, because the same Jesus who started the story is about to finish it.